Hi, boys and girls. We are going to be reading chapter 6 together, The Spinal Cord and Brain. As we read, you're going to be completing activity book page 8.1. So you might want to read a page and then stop and see what questions on activity book page 8.1 you can answer. Here we go. The spinal cord and brain. You've got a lot of nerves. Really, you do. You have nerves in your fingers. You have nerves in your toes. There are nerves all over your body. But there are two parts of your body that are especially important for your nervous system. One is the spinal cord. The other is the brain. And there's the picture, your brain, spinal cord, and nerves. I told you a little bit about the spinal cord earlier when we were looking at the skeletal system. I told you that the bones that make up your spine, the vertebrae, are there to protect your spinal cord. The vertebrae are hollow and long strings of nerves run through the hollow parts of the bones. Remember, hollow means empty. The nerves that make up the spinal cord run all the way up your back and neck. They end up in the brain. If I were to have a serious accident and damage my spinal cord, I might end up paralyzed, unable to move my legs and or my arms. I might need to use a wheelchair to get around, like the boy in this photograph, right there. You see, the brain uses the spinal cord as a sort of superhighway to send messages out to the rest of the body. If the spinal cord is broken or damaged, the messages can't get through to the arms and legs. These children have experienced change to their spinal cords, which impacts how they move. The spinal cord leads right to the center of your nervous system, your brain. It's the brain that receives messages from the nerves. It's the brain that sends messages out to your muscles. Even though the brain weighs only 2 to 3 pounds, it is the most important organ for life. The brain is protected by the skull. Inside the skull, there are 3 layers of fiber and fluid protecting the brain. So the brain is really well protected, but it can still be harmed. Ask a football player who's had a concussion. Getting a concussion is like bruising the brain. Ouch! The brain is divided into 3 main parts: the medulla, the cerebellum, and the cerebrum. Each part has its own job to do. The medulla, or brain stem, is located at the base of the skull in the back, right where the spinal cord meets the brain, right here. The medulla controls the important involuntary actions of the body, like breathing, heartbeat, and digestion. Remember, involuntary, this word involuntary means that you do it without thinking. You don't have to think about it. It just happens automatically. The cerebellum sits right next to the medulla. It is divided into 2 hemispheres or halves. The cerebellum has several jobs. One of them is to control voluntary movements. Those are the ones that we make happen. We think about it and we make it happen. That means the cerebellum helps you walk, run, and jump. The 2 hemispheres of the cerebellum control different parts of the body. The right hemisphere controls movement on the left side of the body. The left hemisphere controls movement on the right side. It might seem strange that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, but that's just the way we're made. And there's the picture of the brain showing the cerebrum up top there, the medulla, the brain stem at the bottom, and the cerebellum. The third part of the brain is the cerebrum. The cerebrum sits on top of the cerebellum and the medulla. It is the largest part of the brain. Each part of the cerebrum has a certain job to do. For example, the front part just inside your forehead controls emotions. The very back part just above the brainstem controls the sense of sight. The sense of touch is controlled by a strip of the brain running over the top of your head from ear to ear. Well, Mrs. Gosher just learned something new. I did not know that. The outside part of the cerebrum is called the cerebral cortex. Oh, do you feel like a doctor saying all these big words? The cerebral cortex is the wrinkly part of the brain that most people think about when they think of a brain. People sometimes call this part of the brain the gray matter. The cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres, just like the cerebellum. Until recently, we did not know much about what the various parts of the cerebrum do. But in the past few decades, we have learned a lot. A decade is 10 years. So in the last few decades, maybe 30, 40 years. Scientists now have even more advanced ways than just x-rays to look at and observe different organs in the body, including the brain. They use something called a PET scan to see different parts of the brain work. A scientist may ask the person having the PET scan to do something like talk or blink his or her eyes. When the person performs different actions, different parts of the brain light up on the computer screen. Scientists have learned a lot about what happens where in the brain by looking at PET scans. As you can see from this image of the brain, some of the things we do take place in the left hemisphere, while others happen in the right hemisphere. Remember, hemisphere is a half. So our left brain does analytic thought, which is like really deep thinking, logic, like figuring things out, language, reasoning, science and math, writing, number skills, and right hand control. The right brain helps with art awareness, creativity, imagination, intuition, which is just having like kind of gut feelings, insight, holistic thought, music awareness, 3D forms, and left hand control. And that's it, boys and girls. We've come to the end of chapter 6. If you need to go back and listen to any parts or reread to answer some of the questions on Activity Book 8.1, go ahead and do that. I hope you enjoyed learning about your brain.